It happened one day near December's end. Two neighbors called on an old-time friend, and they found his shop so meager and mean, made gay with 1,000 pounds of green. And Conrad was sitting with face ashine, when suddenly he stopped as he stitched a twine, and he said, "Old friends, at dawn today, when the cock was a-crowing the night away, the Lord appeared in a dream to me, and he said, I'm coming your guest to be. So I've been busy with feet astir, strewing my shop with branches of fir. The table is set, and the candle is shined, and over the rafters the holly is twined. And now I'll wait for my Lord to appear, and listen closely, so I will hear his steps as he nears my humble place, and I'll open the door and see look on his face." So his friends went home and left Conrad alone, for this was the happiest day he had known. For long since his family had passed away, and Conrad had spent many a sad Christmas day. But he knew, with the Lord as his Christmas guest, this Christmas would be the dearest of his. So he listened with only joy in his heart, and with every sound he would rise with a start, and look Lord to be at his door, like a vision he had had a few hours before. So he ran to the window after hearing a sound, but all he could see on the snow-covered ground was a shabby beggar, whose shoes in my shop I lost my coat, and all his clothes were ragged and worn. But Conrad was touched, and he went to the door, and he said, "Your feet must be frozen and sore. I have some shoes in my shop for you, and a coat that will keep you warmer too." So with a grateful heart, the man went away. But Conrad noticed the time of day, and he wondered what made the dear Lord so late, and how much longer he'd have to wait. Then he heard a knock, and he ran to the door, but it was only a stranger once more. A bent old lady with a shawl of black and a bundle of kindling piled on her back. She asked for only a place to rest, but that was reserved for Conrad's great guest. But her voice seemed to plead, "Don't send me away. Let me rest for a while on this Christmas day." So Conrad brewed her a steamy cup and told her to sit at the table and sup. But after she left, he was filled with dismay, for he saw that the hours were slipping away, and the Lord hadn't come as he said he would. Then Conrad felt sure he had misunderstood, when out of the stillness he heard a cry, "Please help me and tell me, where am I?" So again he opened his friendly door and stood disappointed as twice before. It was only a child who had wandered away and was lost from her family on Christmas Day. Again, Conrad's heart was heavy and sad, but he knew he should make the little girl glad. So he called her in, and he wiped her tears and quieted all her childish fears. Then he led her back to her home once more. But as he entered his own darkened door, he knew that the Lord wasn't coming today, for the hours of Christmas had passed away. So he went to his room, and he knelt down to pray. And he said, "Dear Lord, why did you delay? What kept you from coming to call on me? I wanted so much your face to see." When soft in the silence a voice he heard, "Lift up your head, I kept my word. 3 times my shadow crossed your floor, 3 times I came to your lonely door. For you see, I was the beggar with bruised cold feet. I was the woman you gave something to eat, and I was the child on the lonely street. 3 times I knocked, 3 times I came in, and each time I found the warmth of a friend. Of all the gifts, love is the best, and I was honored to be your Christmas guest." Today, as we have our last Sunday morning service before the end of the year, today we celebrate Christmas. And that's why I entitled a message today, "What Child Is This?" Because today we light the Christ candle. And everything in our life and everything in our eternity centers around the meaning of the Christ candle. Indeed, what child is this? Because this has been guaranteed to us since the beginning of time. And I want to show you this morning, I hope, how God's sovereign hand has put all of this in place and brought us to where we are today. John chapter 1 and verse 1. We see the fact that Jesus didn't come into being in Bethlehem, but the scriptures tell us that he has always existed. John chapter 1 verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. There's never been a time that Jesus hadn't existed because Jesus is God. So in the plans for eternity, we see it play out before us. Again in John chapter 1 and verse 14. The next step, God left heaven and he came to earth, and it said the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. God became one of us. As we read the scriptures, we read our Bibles, we're pretty up to date on all the laws and the prophets and all the things that took place to put this Bible together and made history. But do we overlook the most important thing? We know about the laws, we know about the prophets, but what about the love of God? A God who loved you so much that he left the comforts of heaven, being king on the throne, and came down to earth to be born in a stinky, smelly stable. If you've ever been in and around barns and stables, you know that they're not pristine like we have, like we see in the movies. It was just a little room off to the side of the innkeeper's house. In fact, there weren't really many inns in that day. Most people, when they all came to Bethlehem for the census, people always had an extra room where they could rent out a room on the roof, and they would rent out their extra rooms to the travelers who came. And it was good for them because it made them some money and it helped the travelers have a place to stay. So I think we give the innkeeper a bad rap. Like he turned them away. Everybody had come there, and by the time they got there wasn't any room left. Now he could have just said, well, get lost. I don't have anything, just go away. But he didn't. He said, no, I have a stable. If you want to stay with the animals, sleep with the animals, you can stay there at least till he gets you out of the weather.
Hallelujah.
And then the greatest miracle that ever took place. God left heaven and came to earth and was born in a stinky little old carved out rock feeding trough. I've heard a story told several different ways over the years, and I think it really illustrates what I'm trying to say. There was a farmer, his wife, and his kids, and it was Christmas Day, and his wife was getting ready to go to church and celebrate Christmas. But he didn't believe in the incarnation. He did not believe that God came to earth. And he was honest enough to just tell people, I don't believe it. At least he didn't fake it. So the wife took the kids There's a bad storm coming up, but she took the kids and she took them to church right down the road. And he was sitting there just waiting for her to return, and the storm was getting worse, and he heard this sound outside, and he thought, what is all that noise? And he looked out into his farmyard, and he had a bunch of geese out in his farmyard that he raised. And they were just running around in the snow, just running here and there, and he said, my geese are going to freeze. So he wrapped up in his coat, and he went outside, and he tried to lead them. He to run them into the barn to get them out of the weather, and they just went everywhere. He couldn't do anything with them. Then he got some crumbs, and he dropped some crumbs, hoping they'd follow the crumbs, and they'd go into the barn, and that didn't work. He said, what am I going to do? My geese are going to freeze to death. And he said, I'm trying to help them, and they don't even understand. I'm trying to help them. And then he said, only way I know to get their attention, he says, I'd have to be one of them. And when he said that, he heard the bells ringing at the church. And he remembered what his wife had said. He said, that's the only way to get our attention. He had become one of us. And he ran back inside. And he changed his clothes and he rushed down to the church to celebrate Christmas with his family. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we saw his glory. But this wasn't just a happenstance. It didn't just happen at this point. No, it happened at a precise time. God had planned this every bit of this right down to the day, if you would, right down to the second. Galatians chapter 4 and verse 4. But when the fullness of time came, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman and born under the law. When the fullness of time came, in other words, it happened exactly as God planned it before the creation of the universe. He already had this day planned. He already had this location planned. He already knew who he was going to choose to be the mother and who he was going to choose to be the father. And we talked about that last week, about the two bloodlines. All the way back, that quote I gave you just now was out of Galatians, but all the way back in Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 2. He said, the people who walk in the darkness will see a great light. Those who live in the dark land, the light will shine on them. Who is he talking about? Who is he talking about, class? He tells us in verse 6 of Isaiah chapter 9. For a child will be born to us, and a son will be given to us. Did you catch that? Don't miss that. A child will be born to us. And a child was born to Mary and Joseph. But what's more important, that child will be given to us by the Father.
Yes.
The child that would be born in the stable in Bethlehem was given to us by the Father in heaven. The Christ candle. But as Luke said in chapter 2, we all know the problem. She gave birth to the firstborn son. And she wrapped him in swaddling clothes, which we described last week, and what all those were about. And she laid him in a manger. And here it comes. Because there was no room for them in the inn. God left heaven, came to earth, was born in a manger because there was no room. And people had no room for God. Would you agree today? People still have no room for God.
Amen.
But some did. John chapter 1, verse 12 said, but as many as received him, to them he gave a right to become children of God. even to those who believe in his name. Folks, that's you and me.
Amen.
Most people will reject him. They rejected him then, they reject him now, but for those of us who receive him, and folks, it's all about Christmas. It's a free gift. It's a free gift. All we have to do is receive it.
Glory, glory.
It doesn't cost you anything. And if you receive it, he gives you a right to become a child of God. John, again, in chapter 1, but verse 29. We go later in his life to where John the Baptist is getting ready to baptize him. He's grown man now. We lost track of everything from age of 12 to the age of around 30. We don't have any idea what Jesus did for 18 years except be a carpenter probably. But the next day it said he saw Jesus coming and said, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Remember last week when I said when the shepherds saw him in the swaddling clothes, the clothes that they wrapped the perfect lambs in for the sacrifice, and they saw him in those, they understood, they knew that this was the Messiah who came to take away the sin of the world. Jesus is the only person who ever chose to be born. Think about it. He's the only person that ever chose to be born. By the way, he was also the only person that ever chose to die. You say, well, wait a minute, everybody's going to die. No, yeah, you're going to die, but you don't choose when. And he didn't have to die. He chose to die. So John is a wonderful book to read around Christmas time. That baby in Bethlehem became the Lamb at Calvary. That's what Christmas is all about. He was as much of a king in the cradle as he was on the cross. He never ceased being God. He never ceased being the king of the universe. But God sent him as a baby so people would have to handle him. They would have to touch him. And everybody loves a baby. It's the one on the cross we have trouble dealing with. Matthew said it very well in Matthew chapter 18, verse 3. Truly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. That would almost sound like an insult to adults, wouldn't it? Jesus said the only way you can get into heaven is to become like a child. Now, he didn't mean be childish. But children, young children, look up to their mom and their dad. They think they're the world. They can't do anything. Dad can do anything. Mom can do anything. My mom and dad, they're just the best in the world. And they trust them. They put their life in their hands and totally feel safe as long as mom and dad is there. And that's what Jesus is talking about. We have to totally put our trust in this child, this one who went to the cross. We have to totally put our trust and come to Jesus with the faith of a child. Oh, to see Christmas through the eyes of a child. A friend who is dead now sent me this several years ago. A man named Sumner Wimp. He said, every year we attend a local church pageant at Christmas time, which tells the story of Jesus from his birth through his resurrection. It's a spectacular event with live animals and hundreds of cast members in realistic costumes. The Magi enter the huge auditorium on llamas from the rear, descending the steps in pomp and majesty. Roman soldiers look huge and menacing in their costumes and makeup. Sounds like Sight and Sound out in Branson. Of all the years we have attended, one stands out indelibly in my heart. It was the year we took our 3-year-old granddaughter, Bailey, who loves Jesus. She was mesmerized through the entire play, not just watching, but involved as if she were a player. She watched as Joseph and Mary traveled to the inn and is thrilled when she sees the baby Jesus in his mother's arms. When Jesus on a young donkey descends the steps from the back of the auditorium, depicting his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, Bailey was ecstatic. As he neared our aisle, Bailey began jumping up and down, screaming, "Jesus, Jesus! There's Jesus!" Not just saying the words, but exclaiming them with every fiber of her being. She alternated between screaming his name and hugging us. "It's Jesus, look!" I thought she might actually pass out, but tears filled my eyes as I looked at Jesus through the eyes of a child in love with him, seeing him for the first time. How like that blind beggar screaming out in reckless abandon, "Jesus, Jesus," afraid he might miss him, not caring what others thought. This was so much fun. Then came the arrest scene. On stage, the soldiers shoved and slapped Jesus as they moved him from the Garden of Gethsemane to Pilate. Bailey responded as if she were in the crowd of women with terror and anger. "Stop it! Bad soldier, stop it!" And as I watched her reaction, I wished we had talked to her before the play. "Bailey, it's okay. They're just pretending. They're hurting Jesus. Stop it." She stood in her seat, reacting to each and every move. People around us at first smiled at her reaction, thinking how cute. Then they quit smiling and began watching her watch him. In a most powerful scene, the soldiers led Jesus carrying the cross down the steps of the auditorium from the back. They were yelling and whipping and cursing at Jesus, who was bloodied and beaten. And Bailey was now hysterical. "Stop it, soldier, stop it," she screamed. She must have been wondering why all these people did nothing. She then began to cry instead of scream, "Jesus, oh Jesus, please." People all around us began to weep as we all watched this devoted little disciple see her Jesus being beaten and killed as those first century disciples had. Going back and forth between her mother's lap and mine for comfort, she was distraught, and I kept saying, "Bailey, Bailey, it's okay. Jesus is going to be okay. They're just people pretending to be soldiers." And she looked at me like I was crazy. In my lap, we walked through the cross and the burial. "Watch, Bailey, watch for Jesus." And the tomb began to tremble, and the lightning flashed as the stone rolled away, and a Super Bowl touchdown cheer couldn't come close to matching this little one's reaction to the resurrection. "Jesus, he's okay, Mommy, it's Jesus." And I prayed that she wasn't going to be traumatized by the event, but that she would remember it. I shall never forget it. I shall never forget seeing Jesus' suffering, crucifixion, and resurrection through the eyes of an innocent child. Following the pageant, the actors all assembled in the foyer to be greeted by the audience. As we passed by some of the soldiers, Bailey screamed out, "Bad soldier, don't you hurt Jesus." The actor who portrayed Jesus was some distance away, surrounded by well-wishers and friends, and Bailey broke away from us, ran toward him, wrapping herself around his leg and holding on for dear life. He hugged her and said, "Jesus loves you." He patted her to go away, but she wouldn't go. She kept clinging to him, laughing and calling his name. She wasn't about to let go of her Jesus. I think God in heaven stopped whatever was going on that day and made all the angels watch Bailey. Now look here. You see what I meant when I said, "Of such is the kingdom of heaven." Bailey's reaction should be our reaction every day. When we think of him, who he is, what he did for us, what he offers us, we have to say, how can we do anything less than worship him? Wouldn't it be wonderful to see Christmas through the eyes of a child? Maybe this Christmas, maybe we can just ask Jesus, "Jesus, give me the eyes of a child. Let me see you through the innocence Mark, in chapter 9, verse 23. Jesus said to him, a man asked Jesus if he could heal his son. Jesus said, if you can, all things are possible
Yes.
to him who believes. I cannot think of a better way. As we celebrate Christmas today, we celebrate the Christ child. Oh, we know all the stories. We have the good memories, the bad memories of Christmases past. But won't you have to admit that your best Christmases were those when you were a child? You had that excitement. Oh, if we could just look at Christmas through the eyes of a child. How different Christmas would be. The innocence of a child. As I've been doing all during our Advent sermons, share one last little story with you this Christmas season. This is based on Luke chapter 2, where they went to Bethlehem for the census. It said, among the most tragic words ever penned are those that are found in Luke's account of the first Christmas. There was no room for them in the inn. There was room for merchants, tax collectors, travelers, sightseers, but no room for the gentle Mary and the divine Christ who was to be born that night. What was the cause of this tragedy? Why was there no room for Mary and Joseph, their expected baby, except in a stable? I have some sympathy for the innkeeper. He was not hostile, he was not opposed to the couple, but his inn was crowded, his hands were full, his mind was preoccupied. After all, it was an unusually busy time, with guests arriving from every corner of Israel for the census and taxation. He probably told Joseph, I wish I could help you, but I must keep my priorities. I'm not a hard-hearted man. Over there is a stable. You're welcome to use it if you care to. But this is the best I can do. Now I have to get back to my work. No room for Jesus. No room for the King of Kings. This is the answer that millions are giving today. It's the answer of preoccupation. Not fierce opposition, not furious hatred, but unconcern about spiritual things. Things have not really changed since that Bethlehem night 2,000 years ago. God is still on the fringes of most of our lives. We fit him in when it's convenient for us. We become irritated when he makes demands on us. Our lives are so full. There's so much to be done. But in all our busy activities, are we in danger of excluding from our hearts and lives the one who made us? The little handout we gave you this morning, that was first produced in Louisville, Kentucky in 1961. We include it in the handout every year at Christmas to help us remember. Hugh Haney was the columnist who wrote that, the cartoonist. Sitting among all the gifts everywhere, parties going on, meals to fix, meals to eat, places to go, things to do. And then he stopped and he asked himself that one little question. Have I forgotten anyone? And amongst all the packages, the face of Jesus. It's good to get together with family, exchange gifts, enjoy each other's company, make memories. That's all good. And there's nothing wrong with any of it. But we need to remember whose birthday it is. How would you feel if it was your birthday and they threw a big party and you went and everybody at the party got gifts except you? They didn't even notice you were there. This year, let's look at Christmas through the eyes of a child. It's his birthday. No, December 25th is not the day. It's the day we celebrate his birthday. I mean, we don't complain about Easter not having knowing the exact day, that we make sure we're doing it on the right day. It's the fact that we celebrate his birthday. So among everything else, among the family, among the gifts, all the other things that are going to take place today, many people didn't even have time today to leave their houses and go to a church service because they were too busy with family, other things. It's his birthday. Have we forgotten anything? Have we left the guest of honor out? What child indeed is this? King of kings, Lord of lords. The great I am. Happy birthday, Jesus. I just wish we could love you the way you love us. Happy birthday. Father, we thank you today for giving us this blessed time together.